Can you hear me now?
Well, I've always believed the maxim that we will always be smarter than me, shared knowledge about success and failure. Welcome to the People Mechanics podcast. Roger Gray, the CEO of the Ports of Auckland, one of the most important and probably key assets in the entire New Zealand supply chain. 2021, they paid the council, the Auckland Council, their shareholders, about $3.72 million. But this projected financial year is going to blitz that by a country mile. They're looking at delivering the council a full year dividend of around $30 million, which is an 111% increase on the previous year's 14.2. Remarkable result. Culture in any organisation, from my perspective, comes from the top down. So I'm interested in the man more than I am in the organisation in one sense. Roger Gray, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here.
It's a fantastic result, mate, that you're projecting. So congratulations on that. I mean, the port you can't really underestimate the significance of the Auckland port for the entire economy of this country, can you?
No, I mean, we certainly play a key role in the New Zealand supply chain. We're the first port of call and also New Zealand's largest import port. And off the back of that, we've certainly had some pretty tough years, but we're coming back out of that now. Once we made a decision to cancel the automation project and focus on our core business, we've been able to secure back volume we lost, and also we've managed to turn around the culture, and I know we'll talk a lot about it. But off the back of having a good culture, a better relationship with our workers, improving our customers' relationship, you're right, we're able to continue to grow our return to the city, and we've got projections that go well past where we're going to hit this year over the next couple of years.
Well, let's just talk about one thing you've said for a moment, the relationship with your staff. Critical in any organisation, obviously. You have a pretty unique viewpoint on relationship with your staff. Tell me about the 4 Fs.
Yeah, we do. Look, we've got a very diverse workforce here. 25% Pacifica, 10% Maori, 10% Asian. Really, but when you go down to the operational workforce, then those numbers would be significantly higher. So a very strong workforce of many cultures. And one of the things that became pretty clear to me early on was when you sit down and talk to predominantly men, we are a very male-dominated workforce. They've got 4 things that are really important to them. The first one is faith. There is a hugely committed workforce that have deep, predominantly Christian values, but not exclusively. And faith is very important to them. And we know the role that faith plays throughout the Pacific particularly, but within the Māori community and the Asian community as well. Family is the second one. These people see themselves as brothers, but they also are committed deeply to their families. And, many of them are the principal breadwinners for their whole extended family and have a responsibility for looking after more than just their immediate family. The third group, the third thing is food. Being a stevedore, it's bloody hard work. And, there's nothing better than getting a good feed and coming into work and getting. As an example, this morning, we had our highest volume through the port last week in 4 years. And off the back of that, we put on bacon bunties for everybody down there, and they've gone down a treat with the boys this morning. So, it's a little thing about using simple things to acknowledge and to say thank you. And lastly, and probably the most important, is we have a mad keen footy followers, and we're not talking Aussie rules like I would like to think about. What we're talking about is the Warriors. And our team are absolutely committed to the Warriors, huge following. And off the back of that, one of our staff recognition programs is to buy tickets for each of the Warrior games and run raffles for those for the team. So they're the 4 Fs at our place.
I think a lot of organisations listening to this could benefit from understanding those 4 Fs. I think that's fantastic. You can't go past food, can you? Because food brings time together, sharing a meal, sharing a plate, sharing some space. Yeah, I think it's fantastic. No, good on you. And it's good to recognise that, Pacifica cultures are heavily steeped in Christian values and traditions. So
Mm.
can't separate that from the workforce. So I think it's important to look at that. Hey,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, some studies that I've been reading have been looking at the fact that successful CEOs right around the globe focus on a very narrow set of tasks and are outstanding at those particular tasks. So without sounding like an egotistical question, what is Roger Gray really great at?
I think getting stuff done. I think there's a lot of people who can identify problems and talk about the issue, but actually practically can't nut down, well, what are you got to do to fix it? And, I probably do specialize in turning places around. I go into places that have got challenging operations or challenging cultures. And I've got a knack to be able to sort them out. And largely that goes by understanding that a really good business needs to focus on what I would call the 3 C's. You've got to get what your customers need sorted out. You've got to sort out the culture. If you get a good culture being built, it always will enhance the customer improvement, and staff will give discretionary effort. And lastly, you've got to make money. And really good businesses make money, have good culture, and are customer centric. Too often they get out of sync, or we're just worried about the customer, or we're just worried about money, and we forget the people. A really good business balances those triangles, and I think I'm learning, because I'm always learning. I'm learning to get better and better at addressing all of those 3 C's.
No, that's good, lifelong learning, and I think it's a pretty important comment to make. Actually, you're still learning, you're still building on those skills. I think if we ever decide we've got there, then it's time to retire, I think. So no, good on you. And I like.
Yeah, I can't afford to retire yet, John. I'm in the middle of doing a renovation, and my wife wants a pool. So there's no retirement. So there's no stop learning.
I doubt that you retire anyway, wouldn't you? I mean, there's always a problem there's always a fire to fight somewhere, a problem to deal with. Interesting. I've been following the Ritz-Carlton model, looking at the Ritz-Carlton model of customer service and delivery. And a guy called Horst Schulze, he was the founder and CEO of the Ritz-Carlton Group. He believes that customers are looking for 3 things. And I find this fascinating. Very simple things to get right and to get wrong. They want speed of delivery. So they don't want their container sitting on the port for 6 weeks, right? They want it out into their warehouse. Speed of delivery. They want what they purchase to be delivered exactly as they purchased it. So they want accuracy, and they want someone to be friendly about it.
Yep.
Which seems like, well, that's not rocket science, right? But it is for some companies, and we get out of focus. I love you. I love the thought about making money. If we're not making cash, if we're not putting money in the back pocket, then we're wasting all of our days, right? I mean,
and we're not sustainable, and we end up making bad decisions in order to do things. So, I'm quite unashamed about saying to our customers, I have to make money too. So this idea that you can get it cheap or you'll trade me off, go somewhere else. We need to be able to make money. And if you want us to sustainably reinvest in capability, then we've got to make our weighted average cost of capital. And that's quite an interesting conversation when you have it with customers. And if you're upfront about it, they do nod and say, well, yeah, well, we're the same. So, I think there's a realization that you've got to leave some bread on the table for everybody in the economic chain. And if you don't, well, they'll do something in order to get some more money. And that's never good. That's never a good outcome. So, yeah.
Fantastic. I know that you've got a military background. So in the dim distant past, you served in the Australian military. Kind of an odd question, but how did that serve you in current role as a CEO? Was there things that you could take from that, or things that you had to give up from that model?
Both. Probably the thing that I took from it. So I had an interesting journey, because being a migrant in New Zealand also has had some interesting things of what I had to give up, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But what did I bring? It is that ethos of I've got to deliver, I've got to get stuff done. And the other thing in the military was, if I commit to do something, I will do it. So don't commit to what you can't deliver, because in the military, if you do make a decision, I was a military logistician, and if I committed to have supply to a certain force at a certain time in a certain location, and I didn't turn up, then the consequences of that failure could well be death. So, it became very, very ingrained in us that deliver what you say you're going to. I also iron my shirts and I polish my shoes and all those sorts of things, which always makes me look dapper. But the reality is that's the one thing I really got out of the military is if you say you're going to do it, bloody will do it. What did I have to give up? Well, that's been a really interesting thing. The military, particularly in Australia, is a very clipped and the way military people talk to each other can be very clipped. They can be very aggressive and at times quite confrontational. And no one particularly takes offence. And Australian business is much more like that as well. You'll find Australians don't have the niceties of a 10-minute, how was your weekend at the beginning? They go straight into the meeting. They get straight to the point. When I first came here in 2007 to run Quality Bakers for Goodman Fielder, I came with an Australian mindset and an Australian way of speaking, and also reinforced by that attitude of the army of being very, and to be brutally frank, it didn't work. I swore a lot, which a lot of New Zealanders found quite confrontational. I was aggressive and demanding. I was very clipped in the way I spoke to people, and it just didn't work in New Zealand. And what I realised was, because I fell in love with New Zealand, if you want to prosper in a country, you have to adapt to the business norms of behaviours, etc. So now, I rarely, if ever, swear. I do take time at the beginning of a meeting to ask people how they are. We do put on coffee and biscuits and have some kai at the beginning of some meetings. We do acknowledge and our history and be it through our use of te reo or not. But so I've had to actually really change, and by changing and adapting, you don't lose the hardness and the drive and the commitment. But you dress it up differently and you worry about how you leave people feeling. I probably, when I first came here, was not empathetic enough for how I was leaving people feeling. And I've had to learn that. And I've gone on a very long journey of coaching and support to become much more aware of how I leave people feeling and having empathy for how they feel and what they value.
Roger, I find that fascinating because a study I was reading, good old research, said that 85% of people believe they are reasonably self-aware about the way that they present themselves and the way that they think internally. Whereas the research says actually about 13% of people have that level of awareness. For you to acknowledge what you just acknowledged, I think is a very rare statement from a CEO. I don't hear a lot of leaders acknowledging they've had to change or they had some things which just weren't working. So, I think that's kudos to you to be able to acknowledge, hey, I've done some things which might not have been working for me. And that's the outcome, right? We've got to have the outcomes. And if our inputs are not right, guess what? We've got to change.
Yeah.
The port is a big organisation. I've had some knowledge of the port industry. It's a very big operation. There's a lot of staff in a lot of areas of the business. Where do you have to spend the most amount of time on a day-to-day basis as the CEO of the Ports of Auckland? Where do you have to hang out?
Yeah, as a CEO, what I've realised is that I've got a very capable executive, and each of them knows their function within where we're structured functionally, knows their function much, much better than I do. And so my time is spent on a number of things, but largely it's being up and out, engaging with stakeholders, be it the owner, government, media, community. And it's about then also clearing roadblocks for my exec. If there's something that's stopping them achieving and excelling at what they've got to do within their function, then it's my job to remove the roadblock. So I spend a lot of time on the up and out, and then the next level would be helping to my exec to excel at their role. And the third area, John, that I do spend a lot of time on is on development of my exec and wanting to grow them. So there's a lot of in-the-moment coaching. There's a lot of discussions around career advancement. And I do give a lot back to people outside, two groups particularly. One is veterans and ex-service people looking to transition out of the NZ or the ADF, because it's quite a bridge to go, and having gone on that journey, it is a change culturally. And the second is when people I meet who are unemployed, I try to help them get a job, because earlier in my career I had 11 months when I was unemployed, and I actually didn't cope very well with it, is the honest truth. And I know how hard it can be to be unemployed and how it can really break your confidence. So I always sit down and have a coffee with someone who's looking for a job if I can help them. So it's one thing that I spend a lot of time on.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because that's pretty important. I mean, we could spend an hour just unpacking those things that you mentioned right there. And I know from previous knowledge of you at the Port of Lyttelton that you looked at your staff from a career development perspective. They weren't just people who fulfill functions. You were concerned about their trajectory in life, and that again would seem to be a fairly rare kind of position, but a brilliant one. So you obviously would have to know your staff at a very deep level to understand where they're going and where they could possibly go. And and correct me if I'm wrong, but that would also mean at times saying to someone or advising someone that perhaps you need to leave here and go somewhere else and gain some skills.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I was lucky enough to work at Air New Zealand for 6.5 years under Christopher Luxon's leadership. And Christopher had an ethos, which was that Air New Zealand he wanted it to become the talent incubator for New Zealand. And one of his KPIs as the CEO was how many of the senior leadership team have left and gone on to lead exec or CEO roles within corporate New Zealand. That was a board performance measure for him. And I remember him sitting there when I first arrived saying, this senior leadership team of 80, I expect 60 or 70% of you will be gone within the next 4 years. Some because you're not wanting to step up to the standards I set, but more importantly, many of you because you aspire to amazing opportunities outside. And so I'm trying to replicate that, and myself and our GM of people and culture, we are really working on the same ethos that Port of Auckland needs to be a talent incubator for New Zealand supply chain, and we're certainly encouraging people. Often, John, people are in the wrong job, not for any fault of their own, and they should, and you get a bit trapped and you don't know what to do. Well, sometimes it's okay to actually have the conversation and say, look, mate, it's not working for you and it's not working for us, but you can prosper in a different organisation because it's more aligned to your values or more aligned to what you believe in. And so there's a really, I think you've got to have those honest conversations as a leader.
Well, that's a conversation of deep integrity, isn't it? That's saying to someone, look, this might not be the right place for you, but there'll be someone who loves your skills, loves your personality, loves what you bring to the table. And I say, you said that's an honest conversation, and I think that's really, really important. And difficult, I can imagine if I had a team of high performers around me and I was benefiting in terms of being the CEO from that, the natural inclination would be to hold on as tight as possible. But you're describing a countercultural and brilliant talent development. I love that talent development incubator.
I've always wanted to be in a position where I grow a team that after about 3 or 4 years of me being in the role, they come to you openly and say, it's time for you to go. I want your job. I'm ready. And that's when you know you've done your job as a leader, because you've grown succession. And with succession, you're able to maintain culture. You're able to maintain direction. People talk about succession planning. Well, the great thing for me about succession is that you continue to bring people up who are going to continue the direction, rather than bring someone in who then drags the organisation to one question or a different direction. That's not to say, though, that being also aware that sometimes you have to buy talent to strengthen your bench means that you do need to externally recruit, and certainly you've got to find that balance.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. I'm a mentor of mine some years ago said to me, the world of the generous is always expanding, and the more you give away, the more you get back. And I think when you apply that to talent development, I think that's an absolute truism. You're being generous in your skill set and growing people. So just to, I mentioned at the beginning that you financially the returns are increasing, and I'm sure the Mayor is very happy about that. In fact, this conversation this last week in the media that they've cancelled the idea of leasing the port out, and they've seen the turnaround and what you can do. But there's obviously still challenges. So what's the greatest challenge that you would face as the CEO of the Ports of Auckland today?
I think the challenge for me right now are a couple. One, you're right, we've had a significant distraction with the potential sale of the lease, which now has gone away. And you know, that you can't underestimate how the threat of sale engenders within staff a worry. And there's been a palpable relief within the workforce that we're going to continue on, albeit an acceptance then that we have to perform better. And probably our big challenge, John, is to continue to improve the performance of the port from how we can service our customers. And going back to your point, I absolutely agree with you. They just want the stuff done on time. They want it quick. They want what they pay for, and they want a smile when they get it, right? So a real focus on us is operational performance. But what I'd say to that is we probably, I've got to be a bit careful here because there's an issue before the courts, but what I'd say is there were some challenging aspects to safety here at the port. And one of the things that we are absolutely fixated on is improving operational performance safely. So we're not supportive of speed over safety. We're not supportive of cutting corners over safety, because unfortunately in businesses like ours, which are heavy industrial, the consequences of failure are nearly always death.
Yeah.
And so off the back of that, in very challenging and unforgiving workplace, safety is absolutely primary to everything we do, but we have to improve our performance. So you've got to find how to do that safely. And one of the key ways to unlock that, from my perspective, is to stop having an adversarial relationship with your workforce and particularly your unions. And the port sector has been a highly combative workplace since the 1800s. Let's not kid ourselves. We are trying to do it differently. And that's the real innovation that's going on here is our approach to employee relationships and partnering with the four unions and bringing them into the decision-making tent, having them co-lead projects around operational improvement. And it's really interesting when the union suggests a change, the workforce go, yeah, no worries. Management suggested, there's a real chance that the union will say no, particularly just because management said it. And it can be as bloody minded as that. So we are on an evolutionary change here, and you might have seen, your listeners might have seen that we've signed a tripartite agreement with the council, with the unions, and with ourselves on the strategy and the focus going forward, because we acknowledge the role unions are going and will always play in the sector.
If you don't mind me poking into the past a little bit, you've got some pretty interesting connections to the union movement because Dad was a union leader, right? Yeah,
my dad before the Second World War was a union leader back in Australia, and then after the Second World War he retrained as an engineer. But he always had a very strong commitment to the workforce and acknowledgement of the responsibilities, the rights, but also the importance of unionism. I probably in the early days grew up pretty classically neo-capitalist and would say, oh, unions are bad, unions are bad. And I had an experience at Air New Zealand where I travelled with some union leaders to an organisation called Cosa Permanente in California. It's a healthcare company, and they've been working under a labour management partnership model for 20 years. And I was blown away by how they were able to achieve amazing outcomes for their patients, economically, and for their staff through having a collaborative relationship with their unions. And I must say I had a road to Damascus experience. I probably came back and went, wow. And then the words of my father started to really ring through even more, and I resonated with it. So I've been on this journey now for a decade of trying to build partnerships. I did it at Air New Zealand, I did it at Littleton Port Company, and now 2 years in here at the Port of Auckland.
Well, I think the old phrase, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, is probably playing around here somewhere. I mean, Dad's influence us, right? I mean, even though we rebel against them as teenagers or in our 20s, those things stick. I think they stick to us, don't they? So
Yeah, I think they do. And certainly my sister tells me as I get older, I look more and more like Dad every day. And now I've got these glasses, which are very similar to what he used to wear. She said, you're even more like the old man. So there you go. Maybe I'm channeling him through my fashion choice of Tom Ford glasses.
So, mate, really, I appreciate your time, but probably the biggest question I need to ask you, and I think this is the most important question of the day, really, is, go the Wars. What's happening this year with the Warriors?
Yeah. Certainly early on, thought it was our season. You can always have a mid-season slump a bit. Boys get a bit complacent. You get a few victories up. You think you can do it. Also, the standard lifts during the season. So we've got to lift with it. But John, what you didn't ask me, which is the more important question, is how's the Melbourne Football Club going? Sadly, as an Aussie rules tragic, they were defeated by Carlton last night by 1 point. So I'm sort of quite in mourning. But is it Melbourne season? You bet. Melbourne will be the premiers this year in the AFL.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have an older brother who has lived in Melbourne for a long, long time. So, there's definitely a foot in both camps for me. So fantastic. Roger Gray is the CEO of the Ports of Auckland and doing, I think, a remarkable job, if you don't mind me saying so. It's a turnaround. It's a delivery for the ratepayers of Auckland of some pretty important cash. Mate, go well, and I appreciate your thoughts.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it as well. And to everybody, take care. Look after yourselves.
Nice to see you.
Can you hear me now?